You wake up. It's pitch black. You don't reach for a phone. You don't calculate how many hours you have left before the alarm. It's the year 1340. You get out of bed, add wood to the dying fire, and sit in the quiet. You aren't panicked. You are in the middle of what everyone calls the watch, a 2-hour period of awake time between your first sleep and your second. For centuries, this was the most peaceful, intimate part of the human day. Now, we call it a medical disorder. Let's start with what we know for certain. Until the late 1600s, human beings did not sleep in one continuous 8-hour block. They slept in two. Historian A. Roger Reconstructing spent decades digging through court records, diaries, and medical texts from the Middle Ages. He found over 2,000 references to a segmented sleep pattern. It wasn't a fringe habit. It was universal. From English peasants to French nobility, everyone experienced first sleep, which began shortly after dusk. Then, around midnight, they woke up. Naturally, without an alarm. This waking period lasted for an hour or two. It was so common that 16th century French physician Laurent Joubert explicitly wrote that the best time to conceive a child was during the gap between the first and second sleep, because the body was rested, but not yet exhausted. But here's the thing. They didn't lie in the dark worrying about being awake. Because what they did during those 2 hours changes everything we understand about human connection. So, let's reconstruct a night in the 14th century. You wake up around 1 a.m. Your brain is swimming in prolactin, a hormone that promotes a state of calm reflection. You don't try to force yourself back to sleep. You might get up and check the livestock. You might throw another log on the hearth. If you live in a monastery, this is when you chant the matins, but mostly, you just lie there and talk. In the tight quarters of a medieval peasant home, surrounded by your family in the pitch black, this was often the only time people had true privacy. They interpreted dreams, they confessed secrets. Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales references characters casually waking up from their first sleep to have long conversations before drifting off again. This middle-of-the-night period was considered the most spiritual and intellectually clear part of the 24-hour cycle. It wasn't dead time. It was human time. You weren't supposed to be unconscious for it, but the most fascinating evidence comes from how quickly we destroyed it. In the 18th century, two things happened: the Industrial Revolution and gaslighting. Suddenly, the night was no longer a time of rest. It was a time of potential productivity. Factory owners needed shifts to run predictably. Time became money. You couldn't have workers casually waking up at 2 a.m. to reflect on their dreams. So, society compressed sleep. We took a natural, relaxed, 12-hour biological window and squeezed it into an aggressive, unbroken 8-hour block. Sleep went from being a natural rhythm to a scheduled task, a task you had to perform efficiently. By the 1920s, references to first and second sleep completely vanished from Western literature. We didn't just change our habits. We ran a massive, uncontrolled biological experiment on the human species, and we erased the memory of how we used to function. Here's why this matters for your brain right now. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted a landmark experiment. He took a group of modern adults, took away all artificial light, and plunged them into 14 hours of darkness every night. For the first few weeks, they just slept a lot, catching up on years of sleep debt. But by the 4th week, something incredible happened. Their bodies completely reverted to the medieval pattern. Without clocks or lights telling them what to do, they slept for 4 hours, woke up for 2 hours of quiet rest, and then slept for another 4. During that 2-hour wakeful period, their brain waves indicated a state of profound meditation, and that is the twist. Your biology hasn't forgotten. When you wake up at 3 a.m., your brain isn't misfiring. It's executing a survival rhythm that kept your ancestors sane for thousands of years. Here's the part that gets me. When you wake up in the dark today, what do you feel? You feel panic. You reach for your phone, you stare at the harsh blue light, and count the hours until your alarm goes off, terrified that tomorrow is going to be ruined because you aren't functioning correctly. You spend your nights fighting your own biology, because an industrial society convinced you that a factory schedule was a biological necessity. We took the most peaceful, reflective hours of the human experience and turned them into a source of clinical anxiety. The science doesn't say you're broken. It says you're ancient. You are carrying a biological clock built for a world lit only by fire. Trying to survive in a world lit by LEDs, we conquered the night. We just forgot how to live in it.